A pope is dead, and a forgotten 900-year-old prophecy may have just been fulfilled. On April 22, 2025, the world was shaken by the death of Pope Francis, the first Latin American pope, a global symbol of humility, and perhaps, according to some, the final name in a centuries-old list of prophetic doom. As tributes pour in from every corner of the globe, another kind of conversation is taking shape. Quiet at first, but growing louder. A prophecy, written nearly a millennium ago, may have just unfolded in real time. This ancient prediction, known as the Prophecy of the Popes, was attributed to a 12th century Irish monk named Saint Malachy. His vision allegedly described every pope to come after his time, 112 in total. With Pope Francis, the final line of the prophecy is reached. And that final line doesn't end with peace. It ends with fire, judgment, and the fall of Rome. For most of modern history, the prophecy was buried beneath layers of religious skepticism, academic doubt, and Vatican silence. But Pope Francis's death, timed eerily close to Easter, a sacred Christian celebration of resurrection and judgment, has resurrected more than faith. It's brought back fear. Not just for what was, but for what comes next. Online searches for phrases like Malachy Final Pope, Petrus Romanus, and Last Pope Prophecy have exploded overnight. And it's not just conspiracy theorists clicking. Scholars, religious leaders, and even skeptics are revisiting a vision that once seemed like symbolic poetry but now feels dangerously close to reality. In this video, we're going deep into secret Vatican records, into the cryptic Latin verses Saint Malachy left behind, into the lives and deaths of the popes he seemingly predicted. We'll uncover what the prophecy really said, who Petrus Romanus might be, and why Pope Francis's death may mark a turning point not just for the Church, but for the world. Could this prophecy actually be real? Could the death of Pope Francis be the sign the world was never meant to understand, until now? Stay with us. What you're about to hear may change everything. The death that shocked the world. On the morning of April 22, 2025, a single headline sent shockwaves across the globe: Pope Francis is dead. The news broke just after 8 a.m. Vatican time. The 88-year-old pontiff had passed peacefully in his private residence at Casa Santa Marta, reportedly in his sleep. Official statements from the Vatican confirmed the cause of death is complications from a sudden stroke followed by cardiac arrest. For a man who had long struggled with sciatica, lung issues, and mobility limitations, his declining health had been visible. Still, his passing came sooner than expected, and on a date that some are now calling symbolic. His final appearance was during Easter Sunday Mass just days earlier. Though visibly frail, he had managed to address thousands in St. Peter's Square, delivering a brief but powerful blessing. Cameras captured his fatigue. His voice, though soft, held weight. No one could have known those words would be his last public message. Just 24 hours after celebrating resurrection, the Catholic world was mourning a loss that felt both personal and prophetic. The death of Pope Francis marked the end of a historic papacy. He was the first pope from the Southern Hemisphere, the first Jesuit pontiff, and one of the most reform-minded leaders the Vatican had seen in centuries. His emphasis on inclusivity, environmental responsibility, and interfaith dialogue made him a beloved figure for many, and a controversial one for others. But as candlelight vigils began forming around cathedrals from Buenos Aires to Manila, a different conversation was surfacing in darker corners of the internet. People started to whisper about a prophecy. Not just any prophecy, but the one supposedly written by Saint Malachy nearly 900 years ago. According to his mysterious vision, there would be 112 popes after his time, each described in a short Latin phrase. The final line referred to a figure known only as Petrus Romanus, under whose reign the Church would face its final tribulation. Pope Francis, by all public accounts, was the 112th name on that list. Almost immediately, social media exploded. Within hours of the Vatican's announcement, hashtags like #LastPope, #Petrus Romanus, and #Malachi Prophecy began trending on X, TikTok, and YouTube. Posts questioning the official narrative began circulating. Some asked why no health warnings were issued in the days prior. Others pointed to how closely the timing aligned with not only Easter but also recent geopolitical unrest, climate disasters, and a growing wave of global disillusionment. Was his death a natural end, or the symbolic beginning of something far more ominous? Mainstream media kept their focus on the tributes. Networks aired his speeches, documented his achievements, and recapped the milestones of his time in office. But alternative outlets dug deeper. They questioned why Pope Francis, who had once hinted he might resign as his predecessor did, had remained silent about the prophecy in his final years. Some resurfaced quotes in which he said he felt his time was short. Others analyzed eerie details, like the ancient oak that fell outside the Vatican wall just hours before his death, a tree long associated with Saint Peter. The Vatican, as expected, remained quiet on the topic of prophecy. No mention of Saint Malachy. No reference to Petrus Romanus. Just a call for unity, prayer, and reflection. But for millions watching, the silence only made the whispers grow louder. Pope Francis may be gone, but what he leaves behind isn't just a legacy, it's a mystery. One that many now believe is connected to something written in cryptic lines 9 centuries ago. Who was Saint Malachy? To understand the weight of the prophecy surrounding the death of Pope Francis, we must first travel back nearly 1,000 years to the life of a man named Malachy. Born in 1094 in Armagh, Ireland, Malachy O'More was not a typical church figure. He rose through the ranks of the Catholic Church during a time when Ireland was undergoing both spiritual and political transformation. His deep devotion, strict discipline, and mystical leanings quickly set him apart. Malachy was ordained a priest in 1119 and became Bishop of Down and Connor shortly afterward. By 1132, he had become Archbishop of Armagh, making him the head of the Irish Catholic Church. He was tasked with bringing order and reform to a fragmented church system. Records show that he was a strict reformer, focused on aligning Irish practices with Roman Catholic orthodoxy. But it wasn't just his discipline that earned him a reputation. It was the miracles attributed to him, and the spiritual intensity he was said to carry. He was known for healing the sick, predicting deaths, and engaging in deep periods of prayer and solitude that often led to visionary experiences. These qualities earned him a near-mythical status. And they were also what caught the attention of Pope Innocent II, who summoned Malachy to Rome in 1139. It was during this journey, some say during a moment of divine ecstasy in Rome itself, that Malachy reportedly received the vision that would make his name echo through the ages. According to tradition, Malachy fell into a trance and saw a line of 112 future popes stretching into centuries he could never have imagined. He described each of them not by name but through short, symbolic Latin phrases, each hinting at a particular pope's coat of arms, birthplace, or defining characteristic. The list began with Pope Celestine II in 1143, and it ended with a cryptic entry describing the final pope as Petrus Romanus, who would preside over a period of great tribulation, after which the city of Rome would be destroyed and the last judgment would come. This prophecy, now called the Prophecy of the Popes, was said to have been hidden in the Vatican archives for over 400 years. It was not published until 1595 by a Benedictine monk named Arnold de Wyon, in a book titled Lignum Vitae. The fact that the prophecy was discovered so long after Malachy's death has led to intense debate about its authenticity. Some believe it was forged or modified by political forces within the Church during the tumultuous years of the late Renaissance. Others point to the eerie accuracy of the early predictions as evidence that the list is genuine, at least in part. The Catholic Church itself has never officially endorsed or condemned the prophecy. Malachy was canonized in 1190 by Pope Clement III for his holiness, not his visions. But the Church has remained largely silent on the text, treating it as apocryphal rather than doctrinal. Yet that silence has only added to the mystery. Skeptics argue that the list is vague enough to be retrofitted to fit most papacies, especially the earlier entries. They note that the descriptions become increasingly obscure and difficult to match after the list was published, suggesting that whoever wrote them may have been describing past popes and merely guessing at the future. But believers claim otherwise. They cite examples like De Mediatate Lunae, from the midst of the moon, for Pope John Paul I, who was elected during a half moon and served just 33 days. Or Gloria Olivae, Glory of the Olive, for Pope Benedict XVI, who took his name from the Benedictine order, historically associated with the symbol of the olive branch. As we approach the end of the list, with Pope Francis widely believed to match the 112th entry, the debates grow fiercer. Was Malachy truly given a divine vision of history unfolding? Or was this list a cleverly constructed manipulation meant to influence ecclesiastical politics during the Reformation era? One thing is certain: whether real or imagined, divine or fabricated, the prophecy of the popes has haunted the corridors of power for centuries. And with the recent death of Pope Francis, it has once again returned to the spotlight. The prophecy of the popes explained. For centuries, one document has quietly haunted the corridors of the Catholic Church. It doesn't speak in plain words, and it makes no direct predictions of dates or events. Yet many believe it may be the most accurate prophetic text in Christian history. Known today as the Prophecy of the Popes, this mysterious manuscript is attributed to Saint Malachy, the 12th century Irish bishop whose vision, according to legend, unfolded during a pilgrimage to Rome in 1139. The prophecy consists of 112 brief and cryptic Latin phrases. Each phrase is thought to describe a future pope, starting with Pope Celestine II and ending with a figure known only as Petrus Romanus. The phrases are not names but symbolic descriptors, ranging from poetic and metaphorical to strangely specific. Some reference heraldry, geographic origins, personality traits, or even notable events that occurred during each pope's reign. On the surface, it reads like a coded timeline of leadership within the church, but beneath the surface lies something far more ominous. The first segments of the prophecy were strikingly accurate. Scholars and believers alike point to the early entries as shockingly well aligned with the actual popes they are thought to describe. One of the most famous examples is the phrase, de medietate luni, or, from the midst of the moon. This line is associated with Pope John Paul I, who was elected in 1978 during a half-moon. Even more astonishing, he died just 33 days later, exactly one lunar cycle. Another example often cited is Pastor et Nauta, or shepherd and sailor, believed to represent Pope John XXIII. Before becoming pope, he served as Patriarch of Venice, a city historically known for its sailors and naval tradition. As the prophecy progresses, the descriptions become harder to match with precision. Critics argue that this lack of clarity undermines the text's legitimacy. Believers counter that symbolism was always meant to veil the truth, protecting the prophecy from both corruption and manipulation. According to this view, the phrases must be interpreted with spiritual insight and historical context, not literal translation. Still, some of the matches appear uncanny. For example, Pope Benedict XV is linked with the phrase, religio depopulata, or religion depopulated, a reference many tie to his leadership during World War I, when faith and hope were in global decline. But it's the final entries in the prophecy that attract the most attention, and the most fear. The 111th Pope is referred to as Gloria Olivae, or the glory of the olive. This is widely believed to describe Pope Benedict XVI. He was closely connected to the Benedictine order, a branch of which is known as the Olivetans. Whether intentional or coincidental, the olive symbolism aligns eerily well with his chosen name and his peaceful, reflective theological tone. Then comes the final line. Unlike the other entries, it does not contain a symbolic phrase. Instead, it offers a stark warning. It reads, "In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations. After which the city of 7 hills shall be destroyed, and the dreadful judge shall judge his people." The end. This Pope, Petrus Romanus, is not given a number. He is not described like the others. His entry breaks the pattern and signals something final, an apocalyptic vision that ends not just a papacy, but possibly the Church itself. For centuries, theologians and historians have debated whether Petrus Romanus is a literal individual, a symbolic representation of institutional collapse, or perhaps a prophetic metaphor for the spiritual trial of humanity as a whole. Many believe that Pope Francis, though not literally named Peter, may fit this final figure. His middle name is not Peter, nor is he from Rome. Yet he took his name from Saint Francis of Assisi, whose full birth name was Giovanni di Pietro di Bernardone, John, son of Peter. He is also of Italian descent, and now resides in Rome, making the title Peter the Roman symbolically plausible. His focus on the marginalized, the environment, and reform has set him apart from many of his predecessors, suggesting that he is leading the Church through a time of tribulation, just as the prophecy describes. Furthermore, Pope Francis's tenure has coincided with a growing list of global crises: war, economic instability, pandemics, and a rising distrust of institutions. Internally, the Catholic Church has faced its own struggles: widespread abuse scandals, declining attendance, financial investigations, and deep ideological divides. To some, it feels as if the Church truly is in the midst of its greatest test. And with his passing on April 22, 2025, the world is left to wonder whether the line of papal succession as foretold by Malachy has truly ended. The apocalyptic tone of the prophecy's final line is what separates it from most Catholic prophetic texts. It is not vague about the conclusion. It references the destruction of Rome, a return of divine judgment, and the end of the Church as a worldly institution. Whether taken literally or symbolically, it is a warning steeped in finality. For those who believe, the death of the 112th Pope doesn't just close a chapter. It opens a door, one that leads to the unknown. The Catholic Church has never canonically recognized the prophecy, yet it has never outright condemned it either. That silence has left space for speculation, and with the death of Pope Francis, that speculation has grown louder than ever. Whether one views the prophecy of the popes as divine revelation or clever fiction, its chilling accuracy and cryptic conclusion have kept it alive for nearly a millennium. Now, with the final name fulfilled, the world is watching to see what, if anything, comes next. Modern papal matches, coincidence or divine accuracy? For a prophecy to remain alive for centuries, it needs more than poetic language or spiritual weight, it needs results. The prophecy of the popes is built around a sequence of 112 short Latin phrases, each supposedly corresponding to a different pope. And for those who believe in its legitimacy, the proof lies not in theory, but in history. The fascination with this prophecy isn't just in its ending. It's in the eerily specific ways it seems to have mapped the lives, origins, and even the personalities of the popes who ruled over the Catholic Church in the centuries since Saint Malachy's vision. Among the many entries that have stirred debate, a few have become central to the argument that this prophecy is more than coincidence. Take, for example, the phrase flos florum, which translates to flower of flowers. This phrase corresponds to Pope Paul VI, who reigned from 1963 to 1978. His personal coat of arms prominently featured a fleur-de-lis, the symbol of purity and one often associated with flowers. While a flower on a crest may seem like a small detail, the exact alignment of the phrase, flower of flowers, to such a specific symbol has made this connection one of the most frequently cited examples of prophetic accuracy. Another often discussed match is Pastor Angelicus, or angelic shepherd. This phrase aligns with Pope Pius XII, who served from 1939 to 1958, during one of the most turbulent periods in modern history. Pius XII was revered for his deep theological writings, ascetic personal life, and emphasis on spiritual guidance, often being described by contemporaries as having an almost angelic presence. While his legacy remains controversial due to his actions during World War II, the alignment between his spiritual reputation and the title, Angelic Shepherd, continues to fascinate those who analyze Malachy's list. Pope John Paul I is matched with the phrase, De Medietate Luni, or, from the midst of the moon. His papacy began in August 1978, during a half-moon. Even more hauntingly, his time as pope lasted only 33 days, almost exactly one lunar cycle. The symmetry of the moon's phase and his brief, luminous tenure created a symbolic alignment that few have been able to dismiss outright. Following him was Pope John Paul II, one of the most globally influential popes in modern history. He is tied to the phrase, De Labore Solis, or, from the labor of the sun. Intriguingly, John Paul II was born on the day of a solar eclipse and was buried on the day of another. The phrase has been interpreted in various ways, from his birth and death under eclipses to the idea of his tireless work ethic, shining like the sun across decades of global outreach, resistance to communism, and theological activism. Pope Benedict XVI was identified with Gloria Olivae, or the glory of the olive. While his direct connection to olives may not be immediately apparent, many have pointed to his choice of the name Benedict, referencing Saint Benedict, the founder of the Benedictine order. A branch of the Benedictines is known as the Olivetans, symbolized by the olive branch. Benedict XVI's tenure was also seen as one of quiet strength and tradition, much like the olive tree itself. His resignation, the first in nearly 600 years, only deepened the sense of prophetic momentum building toward a climax. Then comes Pope Francis, the 112th and final pope on the list. While the Prophecies' final line does not assign him a symbolic title in Latin, many believe he embodies Petrus Romanus, the last figure in the prophecy who is said to shepherd the church during Great Tribulation. Though not named Peter, Francis was born Jorge Mario Bergoglio to Italian immigrants and now reigns from Rome, placing him symbolically within the framework of Peter the Roman. His focus on humility, care for the poor, and reformation of the Church comes at a time when religious institutions face global skepticism and internal division. For many, this fulfillment is not in a name, but in the narrative. Skeptics argue that many of these connections are vague or retrofitted. They say the prophecy's phrases are so broad that with enough creativity, they could match anyone. Words like sun, moon, flower, and shepherd are common symbols, especially in religious and heraldic traditions. They point out that matches become much harder to define after the Prophecies' publication in 1595, suggesting that early entries were based on known facts, while the rest became more abstract guesses. Some critics even suggest that Arnold de Wyon, the monk who first published the prophecy, may have invented it to influence church politics during the papal conclave. But even among skeptics, there is often an admission of uncanny pattern. The moon and eclipse timing with John Paul I and II. The olive symbolism of Benedict XVI. The solar birth and burial of John Paul II. These alignments go beyond metaphor. They involve dates, historical events, and verifiable heraldry. Then there are the broader patterns. The final few popes have led during a time of intensifying global crisis. The world has seen wars across continents, natural disasters at unprecedented scales, pandemics, economic collapses, and rising distrust in traditional institutions. The Catholic Church itself has faced decades of internal scandal, financial exposure, and declining numbers. The timing of these global upheavals, matched with the closing of the prophetic list, gives rise to a deeper unease. If the prophecy was meant to signal the final era of the Church, the signs are all around us. There is also the matter of the final line's tone. It does not merely conclude the list. It forecasts judgment. The destruction of the city of seven hills, a poetic term for Rome, is one of the oldest metaphors for apocalyptic collapse in both religious and secular literature. That the prophecy ends not with a word of transition, but with a warning, gives it an entirely different weight. And now that the man believed to embody the final name, Pope Francis, is gone, believers in the prophecy say this is the point where the symbolic becomes real. For centuries, the Vatican has remained quiet on Malachy's list. It is not included in official doctrine, and few church leaders speak about it openly. But the mystery surrounding it remains alive, perhaps because it is never fully disproven, only deferred. And every time another pope passes, attention turns once again to the lines that Saint Malachy is said to have scribbled nearly 1,000 years ago. Was this prophecy a medieval invention? Or was it a map of divine foresight, slowly revealing itself through time? Either way, the pattern is undeniable. And now that the final name has fallen, the world waits to see whether the prophecy was merely a curious manuscript, or the last warning written in code. The last pope is Francis Petrus Romanus. When Saint Malachy penned, or was said to have penned, his cryptic prophecy nearly 900 years ago, no one could have imagined a man like Jorge Mario Bergoglio stepping into the most powerful religious role on earth. And yet, as history played out, the 112th Pope described in the Prophecy of the Popes came to be known to the world as Pope Francis. To believers of the prophecy, this wasn't a mere coincidence. To them, Pope Francis wasn't just a reformer or a global spiritual leader. He was Petrus Romanus, the final pope. The claim that Pope Francis might fulfill the role of the last pope hinges on several symbolic and historical details. Though born in Argentina, Pope Francis is the son of Italian immigrants. His father was born in Italy, and his family lineage is deeply rooted in Roman Catholic tradition. He now resides in Rome, leads the Roman Church, and has been viewed by many as a shepherd unlike any other, someone attempting to guide a fractured flock through an age of unprecedented global chaos. The idea of him being a Roman pope is not bound to his passport, but to his spiritual and ancestral identity, both of which undeniably tie him to the eternal city. The name he chose, Francis, is also significant. It marked the first time in history that a pope had taken the name of Saint Francis of Assisi, a man known for radical humility, devotion to poverty, and a deep connection to nature. But even more interesting is the fact that Saint Francis's full birth name was Giovanni di Pietro di Bernardone. In other words, John, son of Peter. When Pope Francis took that name, he may not have realized he was echoing a prophetic identity. Or perhaps he did. Either way, it adds another layer to the theory that he embodies Peter the Roman. But name and ancestry are only part of the equation. What truly sets Pope Francis apart are his actions. From the moment he stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica in 2013, it was clear that this would be a different kind of papacy. He refused the traditional red shoes and golden cross, choosing instead to wear a plain iron cross and live in a modest Vatican guesthouse rather than the ornate apostolic palace. His tone was softer, more inclusive, and more focused on the poor, the environment, and global equity than his predecessors. These decisions endeared him to millions, especially those disillusioned by the Church's handling of scandal, wealth, and doctrine. But they also sparked fierce criticism. Conservative factions within the Church accused him of undermining tradition. His moves toward interfaith dialogue, particularly with Islam and Judaism, were seen by some as compromising the Church's theological purity. His encyclical on climate change, Laudato Si', shifted papal focus from spiritual salvation to planetary survival. And in countries where Catholicism had long been politically entrenched, his progressive tone created division rather than unity. All of this contributes to the belief that Pope Francis was not just another pope in the line. He was the final shepherd, leading through tribulation, just as Malachy's prophecy foretold. The prophecy's final entry doesn't simply mention a pope. It mentions a time of great persecution, trials, and the eventual fall of the city of Seven Hills, Rome itself. During Francis's papacy, the Church faced some of its most serious challenges in modern history. Sexual abuse scandals erupted globally. Financial investigations into the Vatican exposed decades of corruption. Membership in many parts of the world continued to decline. And Francis himself became a lightning rod, not only for Catholics but for the entire religious world. In 2013, his papacy began in the wake of another unprecedented event, the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. Benedict's decision to step down broke a 600-year-old tradition and created a unique situation in which two living popes occupied the Vatican. For nearly a decade, Benedict lived in quiet seclusion within the Vatican walls, while Francis carried out the duties of leadership. This overlapping of two popes was interpreted by many as a prophetic precursor. Some saw it as symbolic of the old church giving way to something radically new. Others viewed it as a divine setup, with Benedict's presence acting as a spiritual buffer until the moment would come for the final line of Malachy's prophecy to be fulfilled. When Benedict died in December 2022, speculation accelerated. Now there was only one pope. One voice. One symbolic leader sitting atop centuries of tradition and prophecy. And as Francis aged, attention turned to every statement, every health report, every sign that his time might be nearing its end. The convergence of these events, Benedict's death, global instability, the rise of secularism, and mounting internal divisions, fueled the belief that we were approaching something final. Theologically, the idea of a last pope carries immense weight. Saint Peter, considered the first pope, was the rock upon which Christ said he would build his church. To suggest that Pope Francis is a second Peter, Petrus Romanus, implies a closing of the circle, the fulfillment of a divine timeline that began nearly 2,000 years ago. Whether one believes in literal prophecy or not, the symbolism is hard to ignore. Francis's tenure saw a return to humility, a renewed emphasis on moral leadership, and an unflinching focus on crisis, be it environmental, spiritual, or institutional. He became known not only as a religious leader but as a kind of global conscience, challenging world leaders, defending refugees, and calling for unity in an increasingly fragmented world. In this role, many saw the embodiment of a shepherd guiding his flock through peril, as Malachy's final phrase describes. And then, on April 22, 2025, that voice fell silent. With Pope Francis's death, the question is no longer theoretical. The Prophecies list is complete. The papal line, as described by Malachy, has ended. Now, the debate shifts from whether Francis is Petrus Romanus to what that role truly means. Is the Church approaching transformation, or collapse? Is the prophecy symbolic of spiritual trial, or is it a literal forecast of judgment? The Vatican has not commented on the prophecy, and it likely never will. The Church has always moved cautiously when it comes to apocalyptic matters. But outside its walls, the conversation is alive and spreading. Some see the end of Francis's reign as the beginning of a new spiritual awakening. Others believe it signals the unraveling of an institution that has stood for millennia. In the end, perhaps the true power of the prophecy is not in its accuracy, but in its ability to focus the world's attention. Because as the name of Pope Francis is etched into the historical record as the 112th, and perhaps final, entry in a mysterious line of predictions, one truth remains: prophecy, whether divine or imagined, has a way of bending minds toward meaning. And in the silence left by his death, the world is now left to interpret what it all meant, and what comes next. The Vatican's silence and hidden archive for an institution that claims divine authority over spiritual truth, the Vatican is remarkably good at keeping secrets. Behind the walls of Vatican City lies one of the most impenetrable and controversial repositories of knowledge in human history, the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly known as the Vatican Secret Archive. Within these climate-controlled, surveillance-protected chambers are centuries of records, papal communications, handwritten letters, doctrinal drafts, and, if rumors are to be believed, dozens of prophecies and apocalyptic warnings that have never been made public. The Church has always maintained tight control over prophetic material. While it recognizes divine inspiration in Scripture, it has long been cautious, if not outright hostile, toward visions, omens, and revelations that fall outside canonical texts. The prophecy of the popes, attributed to Saint Malachy, exists in a strange gray zone. It has never been officially embraced by the Catholic Church, yet it has never been explicitly condemned either. That silence has done little to quiet speculation. If anything, it has amplified it. The Vatican's resistance to discussing Malachy's prophecy publicly has only deepened public fascination. To believers, the Church's silence is not neutrality, it is a quiet confirmation. If the prophecy were obviously false, critics argue, the Vatican would have had every incentive to denounce it, particularly in modern times when misinformation can spread globally in seconds. but it has chosen not to. Instead, the prophecy exists in an unspoken purgatory, unofficial, unvalidated, but never debunked. It is this deliberate ambiguity that keeps it alive, always one heartbeat away from relevance. This culture of secrecy is not new. The Vatican has a long and well-documented history of suppressing or delaying the release of prophetic revelations. The most famous case in recent memory is the Third Secret of Fatima. In 1917, 3 shepherd children in Portugal claimed to have received visions from the Virgin Mary. The first 2 secrets were released publicly in the decades that followed, but the third remained hidden until the year 2000. When the Vatican finally disclosed the text, it spoke of a bishop in white climbing a mountain among the corpses of martyrs before being killed by soldiers. The Church interpreted it as a reference to the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. But many critics and Catholic scholars believed that the released version was incomplete, sanitized, or only a portion of what was actually given to the children. To this day, alternative versions of the Third Secret circulate among prophecy watchers. Some claim it predicted a global apostasy within the Church. Others believe it warned of a final pope overseeing the fall of Rome and the rise of a false church. Whether true or not, the perception of withholding truth has contributed to the idea that the Vatican has access to deeper, darker knowledge about the fate of the world, knowledge it is unwilling to share. The prophecy of the popes fits neatly into this landscape of mystery. Though it first appeared publicly in the 1595 book Lignum Vitae, the prophecy was allegedly written centuries earlier, around 1139. The gap between its origin and publication has sparked endless speculation. Was it hidden in the archives all that time? Was it edited or added to by church insiders looking to sway papal elections? Was it found and then suppressed, only to resurface when politically useful? There are other examples of buried or delayed revelations throughout church history. The suppression of certain Gnostic texts, the index of forbidden books, and the Church's historical resistance to scientific discoveries all illustrate a long-standing pattern. When information threatens the spiritual or political structure of the Vatican, it is either buried or reframed. Prophecies are no exception. If a prediction inspires faith, it may be cautiously acknowledged. But if it risks undermining papal authority or sowing fear, it is often cast into silence. The Vatican's official response to Malachy's prophecy has been one of careful omission. While theologians occasionally discuss it in academic circles, no pope in modern memory has made a public statement regarding its validity. During Pope Francis's lifetime, he was never directly asked about it in any public forum. The few times the prophecy has been referenced in Catholic media, it has been brushed off as a curiosity, a relic of apocalyptic imagination rather than a threat to church doctrine. And yet, the timing of key papal transitions has continued to stir anxiety. The resignation of Pope Benedict XVI in 2013 was seen by many as a seismic event. Some interpreted it as a divine shift, the kind that precedes the final fulfillment of prophecy. With Pope Francis's arrival, and his unconventional papacy, the conversation intensified. Now, following his death in 2025, attention returns once more to the vaults of the Vatican and what may still lie undisclosed. If the Church has internal documents relating to the prophecy of the popes, they have not been released. If Vatican historians have debated its authenticity in closed sessions, those debates remain sealed. And if the final prophecy, Petrus Romanus, was ever recognized internally as applying to Pope Francis, that acknowledgement has never seen the light of day. This refusal to speak, to deny or confirm, is not without purpose. Silence in the Vatican is strategic. By saying nothing, the Church avoids legitimizing fear or giving weight to what it deems speculative theology. But it also keeps the public guessing, and in that guessing lies the power of the unknown. For every person who dismisses the prophecy as myth, another sees silence as a veiled nod to its truth. The Vatican's hidden archives have long served as the backdrop to some of the world's most enduring mysteries. From censored revelations to undisclosed relics, it is a place where history meets control. And in the case of the prophecy of the popes, it may be where the truth still resides, filed away, quietly resting beneath centuries of prophecy, psychology, and power. Why people believe. Throughout history, humans have been drawn to prophecy not just for answers, but for a sense of control in a world that often feels chaotic. When faced with the unknown, prophecy offers a framework, one that suggests there is order, meaning, and perhaps even destiny behind the events of our time. Whether it appears in ancient scriptures, the cryptic writings of seers, or the visions of saints, prophetic language speaks directly to something primal within the human psyche. It tells us that someone saw this coming, and therefore, we are not entirely lost. Psychologists have long studied the allure of prophetic belief. One of the leading theories is based on the human brain's instinctive desire for pattern recognition. Our minds are wired to seek connections between events, especially when those events involve fear or uncertainty. This tendency is not irrational in itself, it's a survival mechanism. Recognizing patterns kept early humans alive. But in the modern world, it often manifests as a search for meaning in places where none may exist. Prophecies, especially ones that seem to match real events, offer a satisfying explanation for otherwise random or frightening phenomena. The popularity of doomsday theories follows this exact model. In times of global anxiety, war, climate change, pandemics, financial collapse, interest in apocalyptic prophecy consistently surges. According to a 2023 Pew Research study, over 41% of adults in the United States believe that we are living in the end times. Among Christians, that number climbs to over 58%. In Latin America, where devotion to Catholic mysticism remains strong, similar surveys show belief in prophetic warnings, especially those tied to the Vatican or Marian apparitions, continues to influence both religious practice and public opinion. While traditional media has often kept these beliefs at arm's length, the rise of social platforms has completely transformed the landscape. YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram have created a digital ecosystem where prophecy, once confined to dusty books or whispered church conversations, now travels at the speed of sound. Viral videos decoding the prophecy of the popes, clips linking current events to ancient texts, and montages of ominous quotes paired with world footage have reached tens of millions of views. Algorithms reward content that stirs emotion, particularly fear and awe, making prophecy-based content one of the fastest-growing niches in spiritual media. This explosion of content isn't just about curiosity. It's about identity. In a fragmented world, prophecy offers a unifying thread. People who feel powerless in the face of shifting political tides or technological disruption often turn to prophecy as a form of grounding. It gives context to chaos. Even among the non-religious, there's a growing fascination with ancient predictions, astrology, and esoteric traditions. For many, these systems provide a sense of cosmic architecture, one in which their existence fits into a larger plan. The Catholic Church has always maintained a complex relationship with apocalyptic prophecy. On one hand, it is deeply embedded in its foundational texts. The Book of Revelation is part of the New Testament. Warnings of tribulation, judgment, and the return of Christ are woven throughout Scripture and liturgical tradition. On the other hand, the Church has historically been cautious about validating extra-scriptural prophecies. Its process for verifying apparitions or visions is deliberately slow and stringent, involving theological, psychological, and empirical investigation. Even widely known events, like the apparitions at Fatima or Lourdes, took years, sometimes decades, to receive formal acknowledgement. That caution reflects a deeper concern. Prophecy, while spiritually powerful, can also be socially destabilizing. It challenges authority, incites mass movements, and often leads to public pressure for reform or revelation. When a prophecy aligns with public frustration or institutional failure, it can become a vehicle for change or revolution. The Church, understanding this risk, has frequently opted for silence or ambiguity, as it did with the prophecy of the popes. This silence has consequences. In the absence of clear guidance, believers turn to alternative sources, some sincere, others opportunistic. The result is a growing divide between official doctrine and popular belief, a space now filled by independent scholars, content creators, and online prophets who offer interpretations more dramatic and digestible than any Vatican press release. The Church's reluctance to engage only amplifies the mystery, making prophecies feel forbidden, and therefore, more true. At the heart of all this lies a powerful link between belief and control. Prophecy has always been a tool not just of revelation, but of influence. Kings and emperors used astrologers and seers to justify wars. Religious leaders have interpreted signs to rally followers or silence dissent. Even today, modern politicians reference biblical timelines and divine missions to galvanize support. Prophecy can shape the behavior of millions, especially when paired with national identity or spiritual authority. This dynamic is not limited to history. In our era, belief in prophecy continues to influence everything from voting behavior to disaster preparedness. Communities stockpile supplies based on interpretations of revelation. Families pull children from schools in anticipation of world events they believe were foretold. Entire movements are built on the idea that we are living through a time of fulfillment, where everything that was hidden is now being revealed. For the Catholic Church, and for believers worldwide, the death of Pope Francis is more than just a moment of grief. It is, for many, a prophetic checkpoint. If the prophecy of the popes is accurate, then we have reached the end of the list. What happens next is not written in Latin phrases or stored in Vatican archives. It's unfolding now, in real time, before a global audience that is more connected, and more anxious, than ever. This anxiety fuels belief, but it also opens the door to reflection. If prophecy is real, what is it calling us to do? If it is symbolic, what truths is it trying to express? And if it is false, why do so many of us need it to be true? These are the questions that will shape the next era of faith, culture, and human behavior. Because whether the prophecy is fulfilled or not, its power lies not in its prediction, but in the way it makes us look at the world, and wonder. What comes after the last pope? With the death of Pope Francis, believed by many to be the 112th and final pope in Saint Malachy's centuries-old prophecy, a pressing question now emerges: what happens next? The final line of the prophecy doesn't simply signal the end of a list. It delivers a dire warning. It speaks of tribulations, judgment, and the destruction of the city of seven hills, widely understood to mean Rome. But as with all ancient prophecies, interpretation is everything. Some believe the prophecy is literal. According to this view, the final pope, identified as Petrus Romanus, is the spiritual leader who watches over the collapse of the Church, followed by the fall of Rome itself. For these believers, the end of the papal line signifies the beginning of a cataclysmic period. The destruction reference may not be merely political or religious, but also physical, war, natural disasters, or divine judgment. Supporters of this interpretation point to the rising instability in global systems, from economic turmoil to ecological crisis, as evidence that civilization may be approaching a breaking point. Others take a more symbolic approach. To them, the destruction of Rome represents not a literal collapse, but the decline of traditional religious authority. In this interpretation, Rome stands for the old world, the institutional, hierarchical church that has existed for 2 millennia. The end of the papal lineage may signal the start of a new form of spiritual leadership, one not confined to robes or rituals. It could mean the rise of decentralized belief systems, interfaith unity, or even a post-religious age where moral authority no longer flows from a single institution. Some even argue that the end of the papacy could pave the way for a secular global order. As the influence of organized religion continues to wane in parts of the West, and as technology advances at a pace that outstrips traditional doctrines, the death of the final pope may symbolize a final handoff, from spiritual sovereignty to technocratic governance. In this view, the prophecy's climax isn't about fire or destruction, but transition. A new world is rising, built on science, data, and globalized ideologies rather than faith and dogma. These theories, while speculative, are not new. Throughout history, there have been repeated predictions of the fall of Rome and the collapse of its spiritual institutions. Some date back to the Protestant Reformation, when dissenters viewed the Vatican as corrupt and irredeemable. Others emerged during the French Revolution, which targeted the Church as a symbol of royal oppression. Even during the 20th century, events like the Second World War and the Cold War reignited speculation that Rome would fall, either through violence or irrelevance. yet each time, the Church survived. It endured invasions, schisms, political revolutions, and internal crises. This historical resilience is often cited by those who reject the apocalyptic view of Malachy's prophecy. To them, the Church is not ending, it is evolving. The death of the final pope may be a catalyst for spiritual rebirth rather than collapse. Just as the early Church rose from the ashes of Roman persecution, a new expression of global faith could rise from the institutional shadows of the Vatican. There are even voices within theology suggesting that the prophecy should be read as an internal journey rather than an external one. In this lens, the fall of Rome is the fall of pride, of corruption, of rigid structure. It is the death of religious ego. What follows is not chaos, but purification. This interpretation aligns with esoteric Christian traditions that speak of cycles: destruction followed by renewal, collapse followed by resurrection. It's less about fire and more about light breaking through cracks. Still, the modern world is uniquely volatile. What makes this moment different is the convergence of technological acceleration, geopolitical instability, and moral confusion. Unlike the crises of the past, today's threats are borderless and complex. Climate disasters, mass migrations, artificial intelligence, and ideological polarization are reshaping every corner of society. In this landscape, the absence of a spiritual anchor like the papacy could leave a vacuum. And in history, vacuums rarely remain empty. Some have pointed to the emergence of charismatic movements, both religious and secular, that seem to be filling that void. Digital influences, cult-like followings, and populist ideologies now command loyalty once reserved for spiritual leaders. The human need for purpose and guidance has not vanished, it has merely migrated. Whether this migration leads to enlightenment or deception is still unknown. There is also the question of succession. If Pope Francis was indeed the final pope, what does that mean for those who come after? Will there even be a successor? Some believe there will be a new pope, but one not recognized as legitimate in a spiritual sense. They argue that any future pontiff will lead a church that is structurally intact but spiritually vacant. In other words, the shell may remain, but the soul has departed. This idea resonates with older Catholic warnings of a false church or an anti-church that mimics holiness while serving worldly interests. Others suggest there may be no successor at all. That the seat of St. Peter, for the first time in modern history, will be left empty, either by choice or divine design. This, they argue, would be the clearest signal that the prophetic timeline has reached its conclusion. A church without a pope would be unprecedented in the modern era and would force believers around the world to reconsider what it means to be Catholic, or even Christian, in a time of spiritual ambiguity. Whatever interpretation one accepts, the death of Pope Francis has undeniably reignited the global imagination. The question of what comes after the last pope is no longer academic. It is here, real and unfolding. Whether that future is marked by collapse or renewal, darkness or revelation, one thing is clear: the Church and the world are standing at the edge of something. The silence that follows the final name on the Prophecies list is louder than any proclamation. It invites not only speculation, but introspection. What does faith look like when prophecy feels fulfilled? What is Rome without a pontiff? What becomes of humanity when the voice that once echoed across the world has gone still? These are not easy questions. But they are the ones we must now ask, together, in the shadow of prophecy. Prophecy fulfilled, or human projection? Pope Francis is gone. The 112th Pope, as listed in a prophecy whispered across centuries, has completed his journey. His death has stirred more than mourning. It has reignited an ancient fire, one fueled by fear, curiosity, and belief. As we look back at the unfolding of this mysterious timeline, we are left with a question that may never be definitively answered. Was the prophecy of the popes fulfilled? Or have we, as humans often do, simply found patterns in the chaos? The facts are difficult to ignore. A 12th century Irish archbishop reportedly had a vision describing the papal succession from his time through to the final pope. Each leader was encapsulated in a cryptic Latin phrase. Over the centuries, these phrases were matched with eerie precision to real-life popes, flowers in crests, solar eclipses, brief reigns, and names tied to ancient orders. And then, it ended. The final line didn't describe a pope, but rather an event. It didn't predict a continuation, but a conclusion. A man called Peter the Roman, guiding the church through tribulation before the destruction of Rome and the Last Judgment. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio to Italian parents in Argentina, reigning from Rome, and choosing the name of a saint whose birth name included the word Peter, seems to fit that final puzzle piece. His papacy was marked by crisis and reform, by a shift away from tradition, and by deep divisions both inside and outside the church. His death in 2025 has come at a moment of heightened global instability, religious fragmentation, and institutional fatigue. All of this has been mapped onto Malachy's prophecy, point by point. It feels complete. It feels uncanny. But does that make it true? This is where belief meets reason. On one hand, prophecy offers comfort in the face of uncertainty. It gives structure to events that otherwise appear random. It suggests that the world is not spiraling, but unfolding according to a higher design. On the other hand, the human brain is a master at finding patterns, even when none exist. It fills in gaps, smooths rough edges, and rewrites memories to make sense of suffering. We want meaning. We crave resolution. Prophecies provide both. Skeptics will argue that the prophecy is too vague to be useful, too retrofitted to be legitimate. They'll say the phrases were written in hindsight or manipulated over time. They'll point out how many popes had to be squeezed into symbolic boxes and how any historical figure, given enough interpretation, can match any description. They'll also note that the final line, while powerful, is not dated or definitive. It speaks in metaphors. It warns, but it does not explain. It leaves just enough room for imagination to fill in the rest. Believers will see something different. They'll see precision where others see poetry. They'll see a man like Pope Francis not as a coincidence, but as a confirmation. They'll look at the collapse of religious attendance, the rise of secularism, and the moral fatigue of global leadership and say, this was seen long ago. The prophecy, they'll argue, is not about details. It's about trajectory. And the trajectory has been unmistakably downward, toward a reckoning. In truth, both perspectives may hold merit. The beauty, and the power, of prophecy lies in its ambiguity. It doesn't claim to control the future, only to reflect it. It does not always shout, but it resonates. It lingers. It grows louder when the world feels unstable. And it returns, again and again, because we keep calling it back. So where does that leave us now? We stand at a strange intersection. The final pope is gone. The Church, once the dominant voice of global morality, finds itself uncertain, divided, and at a crossroads. The world is more connected than ever, yet more divided in spirit. Faith remains, but it has splintered. Truth exists, but it's harder to trust. The prophecy, whether real or imagined, has done its job. It has made us ask the unthinkable. It has made us wonder if this moment was ever truly ours to decide. And now, the question is yours. Was this truly foreseen by a man of God nearly 1,000 years ago? Or are we simply doing what humans have always done, writing our own meaning into the blank spaces of history? In the end, perhaps the prophecy was never meant to be proven. Perhaps its real purpose was not to predict an ending, but to force reflection. To shake us awake. To make us consider what it means to lead, to believe, and to carry faith in an age where so much feels broken. If this video has stirred something in you, if you found yourself questioning more than just what you've heard, then the prophecy, in a way, has already fulfilled its purpose. What do you believe? Let us know in the comments. Share your thoughts. Explore the questions. Because even if the prophecy has ended, the conversation is only just beginning. Now it's your turn. Do you believe this was the end of the line, or just the beginning of something greater? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're watching. And if this prophecy truly came to pass, what else might be waiting in the shadows of history? Could another forgotten warning be about to awaken? Subscribe now, like this video, and share it with others who seek the truth. Because we're not done. In fact, we're just getting started.